The most famous painting in the world sat in a locked room for 2 years, and nobody noticed. August 21, 1911. The Louvre's director Théophile Hamal received a letter that made his hands shake. The Mona Lisa was gone, not damaged, not vandalized, gone, pulled from its iron frame, vanished into the Paris underworld like smoke. I've read the museum's logbook myself, the one they kept locked away for decades. What struck me wasn't the theft, it was the silence that followed. For 2 years, the most celebrated painting on Earth simply didn't exist as far as the public knew. Let me rewind. The painting had been hanging in the Louvre's Salon Carré since 1797. Thousands of visitors passed it daily. Guard duty was lax. This was the Belle Epoque, not Fort Knox. The museum trusted that no one would dare. That complacency was a weapon waiting for the right hand to wield it. Enter Vincenzo Peruggia. Not a criminal mastermind, not a nobleman with a grudge, a handyman, a 30-year-old Italian glazier who'd worked inside the Louvre installing glass panels. He knew the building's rhythm like a burglar knows a house he's cased for months. He knew which guards took smoke breaks, which doors stuck, which corners had blind spots. On that August morning, Peruggia arrived before dawn. He wasn't alone, he had help, though historians still debate who. He wore a white worker's smock, the uniform of invisibility. To any guard who glanced his way, he was maintenance, just another man doing his job. He walked straight to the Salon Carré, removed the painting from its frame, and tucked it under his arm. Total time, maybe 10 minutes. The genius wasn't the theft itself, it was what happened next. Peruggia didn't fence the painting to some Russian oligarch or hide it in a shade-out basement. He took it to a modest apartment in Montmartre and waited. For 2 years, he sat with the Mona Lisa in his living room, watching the world lose its mind. The Louvre's response was chaos wrapped in denial. At first, they didn't even announce the theft publicly, too embarrassing. The world's most famous museum had lost the world's most famous painting, and no one wanted to admit it. When word leaked, Paris erupted. Newspapers printed wild theories, art thieves, anarchists, a jealous rival artist. Everyone had a suspect, no one had answers. The irony, and I've found this in period accounts, is that the theft made the Mona Lisa more valuable, more famous, more mythologized than it ever was hanging on a museum wall. Suddenly, it wasn't just a painting, it was a ghost, a legend, the missing piece of civilization itself. Peruggia understood something modern thieves rarely do: scarcity creates obsession. But Peruggia was no strategist. He was a working man with a stolen masterpiece and no realistic way to profit from it. By 1913, he'd grown desperate. He contacted an art dealer in Florence, offering to sell the painting back to Italy. He genuinely believed that the Mona Lisa belonged in Leonardo's homeland, not in French hands. Patriotism mixed with greed, a dangerous cocktail. The dealer played him perfectly. Instead of buying, he alerted the police. In December 1913, Peruggia walked into a trap. He showed up in Florence with the painting, expecting a buyer. Instead, he found handcuffs. Italian authorities held him briefly, then extradited him back to France. The painting was recovered undamaged, and Peruggia, he served less than a year in prison. Here's what haunts me about this case: Peruggia wasn't punished like a criminal. The French public treated him like a folk hero. Newspapers called him a patriot. When he was released, he walked free into relative obscurity. He lived another 54 years, died in a small Italian town, and took his full story with him to the grave. The Mona Lisa returned to the Louvre, but it never hung in the same place again. It was moved to a more secure location, protected behind reinforced glass. The theft changed museum security forever, but it also changed how we see the painting itself. Before 1911, it was masterpiece. After 1911, it became untouchable, legendary, worth stealing for. What strikes me most, looking back at the logbooks and court records, is that Peruggia succeeded not because he was brilliant, but because the system believed itself invulnerable. He walked into the most famous museum in the world in broad daylight, wearing a smock, and stole its crown jewel. No explosives, no getaway driver, no elaborate con, just a working man in a moment of institutional blindness. The Mona Lisa still hangs in the Louvre today, behind bulletproof glass, under constant surveillance. Thousands of visitors queue for hours to see it. Most of them don't know that it once vanished, that for 2 years it belonged to a handyman in Montmartre, that the greatest art heist in history wasn't solved by detectives, it was solved by the thief's own impatience. Subscribe for more untold stories from history's greatest heists, where the real crime isn't always the theft itself, but what the theft reveals about the world that failed to stop it. Subscribe every week. We uncover the audacious heists that rewrote history.